I could not be more pleased to introduce Isabel Allende. Exactly. She has written 21 best-selling books. They've been translated into 35 languages, and they have sold nearly 70 million copies. In 2014, President Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our nation's highest civilian honor. I first read Isabel Allende when I was in college, and a friend handed me a copy of The House of the Spirits. I was spellbound by its strong women and beautiful language, two things that you know are hallmarks of her books. Her most recent novel, The Japanese Lover, is a sweeping love story that asks thoughtful questions about identity, passion, and redemption. And here's some happy news. Just announced yesterday, Isabel's next novel, called In the Midst of Winter, will be published this fall. I can't wait. Isabel Allende has flown across the country to be with us today. She will be in conversation with Carol Fitzgerald, president and founder of the Book Report Network. Please give a warm welcome to Isabel and Carol.
I'm so looking forward to our conversation. I first saw you back in 2006, and you were at the Miami Book Fair. And I walked into the room, and I was waiting to get inside, and there was this huge crowd of people, and I thought those were the people waiting to get in the room. But instead, that was the overflow room. The room was filled inside. And I remember just sitting there saying, wow, this is just a fantastic speaker. And I still remember that conversation. So I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today.
Well, I hope I won't disappoint you.
No, you will not. Absolutely will not. Well, first of all, Wendy just shared the news about the new book, In the Midst of Winter. Now, is that a title that's absolutely perfect given the weather today?
Yeah, given the book also.
Given the book also?
Because it all happens in 3 days of the big storm, the snowstorm that we had in New York last year.
Oh, really?
So it all happens in Brooklyn in 3 days during the storm.
Can you tell us more about it? So what happens?
No, I don't want to tell you.
You're not going to tell us anything. You're not going to give us anything away. Nothing away about the plot or the story. Okay.
It's the story of 3 people, unlikely people, who are trapped in the storm, trapped in a house, and trapped in a situation in which something happens that changes them completely. And I got the title from a quote by Albert Camus that says, "In the midst of winter, I learned that I have an invincible summer in me." And the idea is that we all have that invincible summer that needs to come out even in the midst of tragedy and pain.
And it's going to be a book about sharing with these people's story over a compact amount of time. It's going to be fabulous. I can't wait to hear that.
And there is also a body in a car.
There's a body in a car? You're taking notes on this, right? Okay. That was just an aside. You notice that was just a throwaway line.
You know, for a year, I was calling all my friends and saying, where can I dump a body? And people came with the weirdest answers. You wouldn't believe it.
The things you learned about your friends.
Yes.
You know, you're saying
everybody wants to kill somebody at some point, and usually a relative.
Usually a relative. Okay, so this is what they're going to do. So part of the thing, when I was really interested, is you had a lot of different lives before you came to be a writer. And you had a lot of different things different paths, different career paths, whatever. How do you come to first write your first book, The House of Spirits? Like, where did you say, I'm going to become an author now? I'm going to do this?
Well, I didn't say that. It just happened. I was living in exile in Venezuela after the military coup in Chile, and feeling that my life was empty, it wasn't going anywhere. I was trapped in a little life. And my grandfather, who had raised me, was dying in Chile, and I couldn't go back to say goodbye to him. And I started a letter that he died, and I kept on writing and writing at night because I worked during the day full time. And by the end of the year, I had 500 pages of a letter that he would never receive, and it didn't look like a letter anymore. That was my first novel, The House of the Spirits. So how it evolved from the letter to the book was miraculously and by chance. So when people say, did you decide to become a writer? No. I was writing a letter.
You're writing, but isn't really what a book is in a lot of ways? It's a conversation that you're having with the reader. It's really like you're telling a story, and the story is going to be read by this person. So that very personal correspondence that you were writing there, you could see how it became the genesis of a book, because it was such a personal thing for you to be sharing.
Some of my books have started like letters. I wrote a memoir called Paula that started as a letter to my daughter who was dying in Madrid. And so it's easier for me if I imagine the person who is going to read it. And then it becomes very intimate. It's like murmuring the story in somebody's ear. That's why I love audiobooks, because I'm in the car driving and someone is telling me a story, and that is a wonderful experience.
Do you have certain audiobooks that you like to listen to? Like, do you like to listen to fiction or memoirs? Do you have certain types of genres you enjoy listening to on audio besides?
Just fiction.
Just fiction, okay?
I don't like self-help books because they don't help. And it's just a waste of time. And I don't read romance novels because they are not set in reality. Those things never really happen. And I don't read a lot of crime novels. I like sometimes an audiobook with a crime novel, but in general I don't, because then I dream with a crime for weeks and weeks.
You've already got the body in the car. So,
I already have a body that I still haven't dumped. So I read fiction, literary fiction, and I read a lot of that, but I also listen to it in the car.
So you also do letter writing to your mom. You write letters to your mother every day, is it? Or
every
is it
single day. I don't finish the day if I have not written a letter to my mom. No matter at what time I come home, I have to write the letter. And she writes back to me. She's 96, and my stepfather is 101. So you don't want to live that long. You really don't. And my mother's brain, fortunately, is good. So she doesn't have Alzheimer's or any of the horrible things that we just heard.
right?
So she writes and she uses all the technology and everything, but her body doesn't work.
Got it.
So you have a wonderful mind and curiosity for the world and intellectual curiosity, and your body cannot take you anywhere.
Now, when you write, do you write via email, or do you handwrite notes to each other?
Before it was handwriting.
Right.
Then it was fax, and now it's email.
It's an email. Do you know, in this electronic age, where we all write emails quickly back and forth, it's, a lot of times it's, one line here, there, the other place. I feel like we're going to be missing something someday.
Oh, no, you're not missing anything.
No?
No. Let me tell you a little story.
Wow.
I'm sorry, Roger, if you're here. But in June last year, someone heard me on NPR, and he wrote me a little note by email. And, my assistant, we get some of those notes, so my assistant sort of answered. And then the next letter, I answered. And then he started writing every morning and every evening, just a sentence. And we have fallen in love. And now I'm here, not for you and for this event. I'm here because he's here.
Oh, the truth comes out. So that's lovely.
Where are you, Roger? Are you there?
Where is he? Where is he? We need to
He's
see.
not. He escaped. Yeah. He escaped right in time. Well, but you see, email can be wonderful too. The technology has changed. Everything is quicker, shorter, faster, but the intention is there, and the fact that we can communicate that way is wonderful. I started writing to my mother when I was 15, and I was living in Chile and my mother in Turkey. The letters would take 2 months sometimes. You couldn't talk on the phone either. An international phone call at that time was impossible. So it took forever to get to communicate, and we established this correspondence in which you don't wait for a reply, because there's no way that you will get the reply in time. You just write every single day. And I think that I do that with email with Roger every day without waiting for the reply. But now you get it in seconds, and that is wonderful.
Now, here's a question. Do you ever go back and reread the letters that you've written? Because I remember hearing at some point that you used to, mark passages that you loved that you might be able to use in a book later on. Are you still doing that?
I was doing that because my mother's letters are wonderful. My mother has no modesty. She can talk about money, sex, anything. Sex at 96, let me tell you. With a partner who is 101. But she can tell me the details. So I always think, oh my God, this is such a wonderful material for a book. But I have promised her that I won't use it for as long as she is alive. And she will obviously outlive me. So I stopped marking the paragraphs.
So there's no need to do anymore.
No need to do it anymore.
No. And things may become dated, you just never know. So I've also heard that you start a book on January 8th, if you're going to be writing a book. True? Did you do this?
Yes, partly because I started my first book on January 8th, 1981, and it was such a lucky book that I thought, okay, out of luck, I will start the second one the same day, and it was lucky too. So then the third one, and now I don't dare change the date because then it will be a flop. But also discipline, you know, I have a complicated life. There's so much going on that if I don't have a time to start, if I don't clear my calendar, if I don't have the mindset to do it, it will never get done.
So if you have an idea in July, let's say.
I wait.
That's exactly what I thought. She's extremely disciplined. I totally knew that was the answer.
And I wait.
And you take notes. You do take notes and you just put them someplace to wait till the 8th.
And sometimes what happens is that I get to December 30th and I don't have a story for the next week. And that's a problem. By January 7th, I'm a wreck.
Okay. Because you have to start on the 8th.
I have to sit down and start something.
Okay, so you start on the 8th. About how long does it take to write? Like the book that you just finished. How long did that book take to do?
It took a year because it didn't need any research. It did have some research with one of the characters, but I knew the life of another character, and so it was simple. But I write also historical novels, and that requires sometimes years of research. So while I'm researching a book, I might be writing another one.
So in The Japanese Lover, which many of the people in the audience here have read and discussed with their book groups, you went to a different country, or you explored a different culture. What drew you to be writing about Japanese culture and what was going on?
Well, the Japanese Lover is the story of a woman who is 80 or 81 years old. She's in a retirement home, and we learn about a love that she has had all her life for a Japanese gardener. Now, why Japanese? If I had made him Mexican, it would have been much easier, because it would be my culture and my gardener is Mexican. So it would have been easier. But the story started, I was walking in the streets of New York with a friend, and we were talking about our parents. And I was telling her that my mother is so old that I will have to kill her because she will live forever. And she was telling me about her mother, who was 81 years old in a retirement home. And I don't know how in the conversation she said that she had a friend who was a Japanese gardener for 40 years. They had been friends. And I said, well, they were lovers. And my friend said, no, why would you say that about my mother? And I said, because if I had a male friend for 40 years, I would have slept with him at least once. She didn't like that a bit. And so I started, this was in December, and I had to start the book in a week. So I started thinking, okay, this is a good story, and let's talk about old love. Is it possible to fall in love at that age or to be in love that long? Explore the idea of love. And why was this important to me? Because I was separating from my husband. I had been with him for 28 years, and it was the end of a stage in my life. And it was a very sad time for me. So I was asking the normal questions that one would ask in those circumstances. Will I ever love again? Is it possible to love at my age? Why did I break up with Willie? What happened? Why did love deteriorate? Is it love like a battery that has so many days of life and then it expires? How does it go? So all those questions were in the air when she told me the story of her mother. So I decided to write a book starting with that little story that she had told me. And the lover, or no, in that case the friend, was Japanese. And I don't have any real knowledge or connection with Japanese culture. So I thought, okay, I'll change him, I'll make him Mexican. I couldn't, because the characters come ready-made. They walk out of the woodwork somehow, and they come as they are, and you cannot betray them in a way. So then I started researching about their lives. What would have happened in the lives of a person who is today 80 years old? What would be the most important thing that would have happened in their lives? The Second World War. And so if the woman is Jewish, what happened to her during that time? And if the guy is Japanese, what happened to him? And then I stumbled upon the internment camps, the concentration camps for Japanese in the United States during the Second World War that I knew nothing about. And researching that, then the story becomes much richer.
Now, did you do a lot of research when you were going and doing research for that? Were you traveling to places?
There's very little to see that is left. But there is a Japanese-American museum that is wonderful. And I have a person who works with me, Sarah Kessler, who is a wonderful researcher. She's the one who dumped the body eventually. So
we'll find out next year where it went.
So I have help also in that sense.
In that sense. You know, you write about passion and love at any age. And I think that you feel very, very strongly about that. And it's so nice to read instead of everybody's going to be 22. And I think that you also write about more mature love at the same time. What are your feelings about that?
Well, the characters in that book are 80 years old. And my mother is 96, as I said, and she has erotic dreams. So
she shares in correspondence with you.
Of course, with the horrible details. I say, Mom, I don't need to know the details. But she goes into it. You know, I think that we are erotic creatures. And we all have the need to connect, the need to be touched, to feel that you are really intimate with someone. When I separated from Willie, I thought, oh my God, finally I'm free. And I'm alone, and I have my dog, and I live in a little house, and everything is contained and wonderful. And I had forgotten completely what it is to be in a relationship when it works. And how everything starts to open up like a flower. Your soul, your body, your senses, the sense of humor evolves everything. I think that we are meant to be with other people, in a community, in a family, in a relationship.
And that first moment when you're falling in love, those first couple of weeks, when you don't need to eat, you don't need to sleep, it's just this...
I eat a lot.
You eat a lot?
A lot.
The eating doesn't stop. But different foods, the erotic foods.
Chocolate and wine.
Chocolate and wine.
Yeah.
Then you know it's a really good relationship. It's really, really good. I'm on the chocolate and wine. Spirituality also comes very much into play in your books. So are you consider yourself a spiritual person, or when you're writing about it, you're just such a feeling of, inside someone's soul? What is your feeling on that?
Well, I think that life is much more than what we control, what we can see, what we can describe, what we can explain. I grew up the first few years of my life with my grandmother, who was crazy at the time. And today she would be a psychic and make a lot of money. She spent her life experimenting with telepathy, with trying to move objects without touching them, with other lives. But also she was very religious, so the idea of death was always there. And on Thursdays there were seances in the house. And there was a huge Spanish table that I have in my house, and I cannot move it. We need two people to move it. And according to the family legend, my grandmother would put a finger on top of the table and it would start dancing on the floor. I never saw it, but it's a wonderful possibility that can happen. So the idea that there is a mysterious dimension of reality. For some people it can be God, it can be heaven, I don't know. But for me, it's just everything that we do not have an explanation for. And I accept it in my life as I accept love and many other things. And I have it, because it's in my life and it's in me, it's very easy that it comes between the lines in whatever I write. So sometimes I've been accused of using it as a magic realism literary device, But the truth is that it happens in my life all the time. And I'm sure it happens in everybody's life, the idea that there are coincidences, premonitions, prophetic dreams, things that we can't explain. Why do we fall in love? Why do sometimes you go into a room and you've been there before? Mm-hmm. And there's no way that you could have been there, but you sort of feel that this is a place where you belong. And on the other hand, you can go into a place or meet someone and you feel an immediate rejection because there is something there in the air that you can't handle.
Your books are so character-driven. You obviously love people, and you love being able to explore people and explore what's going on with them. Does it always start with character? Does it start with story? Where do you usually start when you're writing a book? Is there a certain path?
Sometimes it starts with a place and a time, mm-hmm. and then let's say I decide that I'm going to write about the gold rush. And so I research a lot about the gold rush in California, and who came to the gold rush? It was a testosterone-loaded place of young men that came from all over the world. It was like the war, you know, those extreme situations in which anything can happen. So it's wonderful for a novel. So I have a time, I have a place, and then I start researching who are the people who came here. And then the characters start to appear. But once the character comes, you can't change the character. And the character determines what's going to happen in the story. I love happy endings, and I can never have a happy ending in my books, because life is not about happy endings. And it seems unrealistic, a betrayal to the characters when you force them into a happy ending.
You want them to have a natural progression of what's going on and where they would be.
And be consistent with who they are. Mm-hmm. So if you have a villain, okay, the villain needs to behave like a villain, but no villain is just a villain. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they are.
But they're
we are seeing this now. Sometimes they are. But most of the characters, I mean, most of us people, like the characters in books, have many dimensions. Mm-hmm. They are contradictory, complex. And that's what fascinates me.
And what you also do, though, is the character stays very true throughout the story. That's what I'm finding when I was reading your books. It was, you felt that this woman was working, the young woman that was working in the nursing home, she's not sure what her role is going to be with this woman. And this woman is very secretive. But everyone has their role, and they move very methodically forward in their places.
But I don't decide that. They do.
They do, yeah. You're very strong on they're speaking to you. The characters are driving the story. And you don't outline in advance. You see where they take you on their journey.
Yeah, I don't have a script of any kind. I wrote one thriller only, one crime novel. And in crime novels, you really need to have a very good structure and a very good script, because you have to plant all the clues, and you have to have a very, it's like a labyrinth, and you need to find your way. Well, I can't write like that. Mm-hmm. So I found myself, I started with a crime, and then I thought, oh, I need another crime. So I added another one, and another one. And then I thought, who's going to commit all these crimes? Well, it has to be a serial killer. Now, a serial killer, who is a serial killer? So I started researching about serial killers. Mm-hmm. And I found a psychiatrist who specializes with serial killers. So that was fascinating. And then the more I kept adding, the more complicated it got. And there was a point when I couldn't get out of it. Mm-hmm. There was no way that I could solve this horror story. There was blood all over the place, and people had been killed in several different ways, and there I was stuck.
Right.
So it took me a while to get out of that.
To get out from there. And you write...
And you know who helped me? Sarah Kessler helped me. She said, oh, I know a place where this can happen. And we ended up
you just call your friends and you sit there and say, where could this happen? Well, let me just tell you what you could do.
Absolutely.
No, it's true. I think the plotting of a thriller is very different, because you've got to drop all those red herrings so that people can actually say, oh, yeah, I saw that coming.
And that's very important, because otherwise the reader feels betrayed.
Right.
A thriller or a crime novel is a game between the reader and the author, in which the author presents the story and the reader needs to guess who the assassin is. But the obligation of the author is to give all the information hidden so well that the reader will not find it. So if the reader finds it, the reader wins.
The reader wins. And you don't want the reader to win.
Of course not.
No, the reader never wins.
No, the reader never wins.
The reader never wins. The reader's just going to know that there's eventually going to be not a happy ending in your books. That they're completely sure of. It's not going to end badly.
In that book, at the end, my protagonist is a Navy SEAL. It's a different idea of what a Navy SEAL usually is. And he has a dog, a war dog, a Belgian Malinois, which are the dogs that are trained for war with titanium teeth and whatever. And so at the end, the Navy SEAL dies. Well, you are not going to read the book, so it doesn't matter. The Navy SEAL dies. And I got all these letters of people who were furious because he had died. And I said, well, I had to kill the dog or the Navy SEAL. Of course I killed the Navy SEAL.
Never going to be the dog.
Never the dog.
Never the dog. The dog's never a problem, right? You're also a very strong feminist from day one, way back, and you're very fervent about women's immigration and reproductive rights, and you have a foundation. And what can you share with the audience about this? Because it's a passion of yours that you've been doing since 21 years now at this point?
I don't even remember. My daughter, Paula, was a psychologist, and she worked as a volunteer with women and girls, mostly in very, very hard, poor neighborhoods in Caracas and in Madrid. So when she died, I decided to create something to honor her, but I didn't know what it was, what that could be. And eventually, because of something that happened, I came up with the idea of creating a foundation that would empower women and girls. And at the beginning, it was just sending checks here and there, but then my son married Lori Barra, my daughter-in-law, who took over my life also, but the foundation mostly. And she
helps find where the bodies get buried.
No, she's not the one who buries the bodies.
Okay.
That's Sarah.
Okay.
No, Lori doesn't want to hear about bodies. And so she runs the foundation. And so now the foundation has a very clear focus. But then after the election, we had a meeting. Before we were helping like 100 grantees. And after the election, we decided, well, we can't spread ourselves so thin. We have to focus on things that are really essential for women today. And so it's reproductive rights, protection from violence, and economic equality. And so that's what the foundation mostly does. And I'm passionate about it because I see the results of how you can change somebody's life with things that that we take for granted here, and in other places you cannot take for granted. Here we take for granted clean water. In other places you can't even take that for granted.
Yeah, it takes a day to carry the water.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Some people are in book groups, but from what I've read, you're in a prayer group, a group of women that get together, and you've been in this for a really long time.
I don't know why it's called the prayer group, because we don't pray.
You don't pray. I've read this.
We don't
and
pray.
You have a great name for this group.
It's called the Sisters of Perpetual Disorder.
Right.
And there is a reason for that, let me tell you. And they were already quite disordered before I came in, but then when I came in, it was all about red lipstick and marijuana and champagne. But we have a great time, and we don't pray, but we try to focus our energy in helping or healing, but for me, what the prayer group does, it keeps me connected to a small group of women who are witnessing my life, and I am witnessing their lives. And no matter where I am in the world, I am an email away from that umbilical cord that keeps me grounded and keeps me connected. And it's been really important, I suppose more important for me than for them, because I'm a foreigner. And I will always be a foreigner wherever I am. So this little group has become my home, in a way.
And how often do you meet or talk?
Every 2 weeks, and we are in touch almost daily, but every 2 weeks we meet, usually with champagne.
Usually with champagne?
Yeah.
Not marijuana?
Well, I can't get it that easily, in spite of the fact that I live in California. And, but it's been good for me in every way, and I would recommend everybody to have a circle. And the rules of the circle are sacred. Confidentiality. Whatever happens in the circle never gets out. So the fact that you can open your heart and your life to these people who will hold it as a secret is wonderful.
And for you as a storyteller, you're also hearing stories. You're hearing their stories and you're hearing...
But I can't tell them.
No, you don't tell their stories, but you're hearing their stories and you're hearing the honesty from which people talked in their lives. And I think that's the reason that there's so much honesty in your books. And the writing is so authentic, because you listen to people. You listen to your mother in the correspondence, and you listen to these people.
But also because people are willing to tell you that everybody here, if I'm alone with any one of you for 20 minutes, you will tell me your story. Because everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to share their lives, their stories. I get letters, emails, several a week of people who want me to tell their stories.
Wow.
Because people want their lives to be witnessed and to be told.
I think that also people trust you enormously too, because you listen. And I think that that makes a big difference. A lot of people talk or they're with friends, but they're not really feeling like they're connecting. And I would say that that's something that you probably bring to a friendship as well, is that you listen to people as much as you share.
Because I love stories.
You love
I'm
stories.
addicted.
And you want to hear their stories and you want to hear what's going on. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And it's definitely infused your work, because you write with grand emotion. So it's clear that you've surrounded yourself with emotion so much. So
Once I get into a story, I become the person, I become the character, and it's so personal, so very personal.
And do you have trouble extricating yourself at the end of the day? Do you have trouble stopping when you're writing?
At the end of the day, no, I don't stop. I carry the story in my dreams. I live with it. I drive the car thinking of the story. I'm always with the story. But once the book is done, I say goodbye to the story and the characters, and they're gone forever. I can't remember what I wrote about last year.
Wow. So it's like you feel like there's no reason to pick that back up. It's completion.
Yeah.
You feel like there's a complete ending to the story.
Yes.
And at this moment, I think we're out of time of us talking as well, so that was a fabulous way to bring that up.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for your time.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. It was lovely.
Thank you, Isabel and Carol. I could listen to them talk all afternoon.